Your partner may not actually be asking for what you think they're asking for. If you're dating someone with anxious attachment, you may feel like no matter how much reassurance you're giving them, it's simply not enough. Text them back, they're okay. Suddenly, you take a little bit longer to respond, and their entire world is falling apart. You reassure them that you love them, but somehow a few minutes later, they need that reassurance again, and it's not enough. I want to explain something to you today that might change the way that you understand these dynamics you find yourself in with your partner. Anxious attachment is less about wanting constant communication and connection, but it's more about having a nervous system that interprets uncertainty in relationships as danger. That doesn't mean that every behavior that comes from anxiety is healthy or acceptable, but understanding where something comes from your partner can be super helpful to changing these dynamics and supporting them. Hi, my name is Elena. I'm a registered psychotherapist qualifying here in Toronto, Canada, and I work with all things anxious attachment, relationship anxiety, attachment theory, and wounds. This is my bread and butter, if you will. I'm someone who was previously anxiously attached in majority of my relationships, and I also have quite a few avoidant tendencies when it comes to family relationships. And I've been the partner on the other side. I've been with people who are anxious in relationships, so I've seen both sides of the coin, and I've done a lot of research and work on this. I'm here to help people with anxiety become their own secure base, and I'm here to help their partners better understand them so that you can all have more beautiful relationships. Let's start with what anxious attachment is. I'm going to give you a brief overview. If you would like a more in-depth video, I have an hour and a half long lecture that I'll tag below in the caption that goes extremely in depth on what that is and how people can heal through it. Attachment is essentially a system that keeps us safe. It helps us to seek safety in situations and in connection with people. It is something that every single human has. We are all ingrained to form attachment with others. We do this primarily with our caregivers in order to get our basic needs met. As you get older, these attachments start to form and develop based on the experiences that you have with your caregivers, in addition to other environmental influences. People differ based on how they respond when that attachment system is activated. These activations are most commonly seen in familial relationships, romantic relationships, and friendships. With anxious attachment, there tends to be heightened anxiety and sensitivity that shows up whenever there's any sign of perceived rejection, abandonment, disconnection, or relationship uncertainty. So, this person that you're with may become super in tune to your tone, to your body language, to your texting pattern, facial expressions, affection, frequency of contact, and perceived amount of distance. Anxious attachment isn't a personality type. Partner isn't simply an anxious person. Sure, some people can have anxiety in other realms of their life as well, but it is a relational pattern that has developed through a variety of things over the years, and you can become more aware of it. You can become more activated depending on the relationship that you're in, or you can be in some relationships where it's not activated as much. It really just depends on the circumstances and their own emotional state. There's a variety of factors that can cause anxious attachment, and it doesn't always stem from caregivers. However, the most prominent things are inconsistent caregiving. A parent that was hot and cold, it was difficult to read them. A lot of times it's like the child was walking on eggshells, not really sure what to expect from their parent. Maybe one day they were super loving and affectionate to them, the other day they were gone, or they weren't there for them emotionally. This could also look like having to work hard to get attention from a parent and to get their emotional responsiveness. Oftentimes, we see that caregivers here are quite unpredictable. They're maybe dealing with their own anxieties or troubles, and that gets kind of projected onto the children. Sometimes there's experiences of significant abandonment or loss, whether that's the loss of a caregiver or abandonment from a family member, or some sort of traumatic event that's happened. Sometimes it doesn't happen through childhood, but this can be from previous relationship experience of, betrayal, ghosting, infidelity, rejection from a partner. Sometimes it's just as simple as having a temperament that's a little bit more sensitive to interpersonal cues, right? Some people are just naturally, they pick up more on others and they interpret that in a specific way. They're just a little bit more sensitive, and that can create that type of attachment as well. The lesson that the nervous system may have learned is not necessarily that people don't love me or people don't care about me, but sometimes it can be more like, I need to pay close attention to everything in my environment because I don't know when a disconnection could happen. What does anxious attachment actually look like in a relationship? And this is where I want you to reflect on your relationship and see what maybe you can pick up. Your partner may seek reassurance, and they may seek it quite often. They may ask things like, are you mad at me? Do you still love me? Are we okay? Do you actually want to be with me? Why are you being different? Why is your tone off? What happened today? Are you sure everything's all right? Do you actually really like me? You may be interpreting these questions as, I've already answered this. I've already done enough to show that I do love them, that I do care about them. Why don't they believe me? But the underlying experience that your partner is going through is that something feels different to them, and maybe they can't pinpoint what it is. They may not know what it means, and therefore that creates anxiety. So you could be having a totally normal day. Maybe you are running late from work and you didn't typically text them or check in with them as you normally would. To you, you're just busy. You're not really thinking much about it, right? But your partner could be seeing that as, oh, something's different. Something's off. What could it potentially mean? And their brain may be making conclusions that this means there's a disconnection in the relationship. They may start generating explanations such as, they're losing interest, or I did something wrong, or they're talking to someone else, they're falling in love with somebody else, or something is wrong. Meanwhile, you're just at work, and you're not thinking too much about it. Let's say this situation was happening to you. What typically follows from your partner is a protest behavior. Some examples are repeatedly texting, repeatedly calling to check in, withdrawing from you to see if you're going to chase them, becoming angry, maybe picking a fight with you, making statements like, oh, you obviously don't care, or you obviously don't love me, things like that, threatening to maybe leave the relationship, sometimes even testing your feelings, trying to see if you're going to show them jealousy or care. Your partner may become unusually demanding. For example, I know in some of my most difficult situations, I would become so demanding that I'd be like, give me your phone right now and let me look through it. Like, let me look through this thing, or show me where you are, send me a video. It's not only a breach of someone's privacy and boundaries, but it also just shows how difficult that mental state was for me. Was it acceptable? No, I'm not justifying it. That's where I would get really demanding. Or it can easily cross into a more unhealthy and toxic realm. They may monitor changes in your behavior. So, like, try to pay very close attention to you to see if there's anything different in your facial expression or in your body language, or just in general of your daily routine and schedule. Now, sometimes this behavior looks like they are pushing you away and doing so purposely, but underneath it could be an attempt to restore connection. Basically, if they push you away, it creates a bit of safety and distance, right? Because their brain is naturally trying to get away from the threat, which is you and your behavior, right? Not literally, but figuratively. Sometimes that is the only way that people know how to get connection, right? It's like, okay, if I show that I'm upset, if I leave, if I walk away, then I'm expecting that the person will come after me. I'm expecting that they will show up for me. And maybe that is when they feel the most connected. This doesn't make these behaviors okay. It just helps to explain why that behavior can look like that. And I'll tell you from my experience, when I was very anxious in my relationships, I did not see my behaviors as something that was negative. It wasn't until after the fact that, like, let's say I had a big blow up with a partner, or they really expressed to me how my behavior hurt them. I, in the moment, thought I was completely in the right for doing so. At that time, this was years ago, I wasn't really aware of anxiety and anxious attachment. I just thought that, like, I cared a lot and I loved my partner a lot, and that everything I did was, for the sake of the relationship, but I didn't realize how much of an impact it had on my partner. I think that's important to express how you feel to your partner if you find that some of their behaviors are overbearing or hurting you. And hopefully that can help them see it from a different perspective. Now, this pattern creates this very challenging cycle, the anxious and avoidant cycle. And you may be thinking, well, I'm not avoidant, and that's fine. You may be secure in the relationship. However, naturally, most of the time, when there is a lot of anxiety coming into this relationship, the person, you who's watching this video, the partner that doesn't feel as anxious in the relationship is going to become a bit more avoidant. Let me map out this cycle for you, okay? Your partner feels distance, whether that is literal distance or they perceive that there's distance in the relationship. Their anxiety then increases. From there, they will seek closeness and reassurance from you. You, as the partner, feel pressured and overwhelmed to give that closeness, to give that reassurance, and to potentially even understand where it's coming from. That makes you more prone to pulling away, whether that looks like, not responding, or needing to take a break, or deciding that, like, hey, this conversation can't happen right now, becoming more cold, becoming less communicative. Our anxious partner then experiences more distance, and now most likely it is a literal distance. That anxiety then intensifies, and as the anxiety is intensifying, the brain is seeing this as, oh, this is a major threat. All of the alarms are going off right now. Adrenaline is at an all-time high, stress hormones are going off, and the brain is seeing this distance as something is wrong. What happens then? Your partner will pursue even harder to close this gap because they need to in order to feel safe. And then that creates even more tension on your end and you withdraw further. Now, there are certain people that don't withdraw as much. They can stand firm in their ground. They can de-escalate the partner's anxiety. However, I find that even the most secure partners will sometimes find themselves in this type of dynamic. So now what happens is you have two people that feel like each person is the problem. The anxious partner thinks, well, if they just reassure me, if they were just there for me, then I wouldn't feel like this and this doesn't have to happen. Whereas you think, well, if they just give me space, I wouldn't have to pull away. And the biggest takeaway is that actually you are both partially right. The problem isn't necessarily that your partner is too needy or that you are too distant. The problem is that each of your coping strategies is accidentally activating the other person's fear. So, pursuit leads to withdrawal, leads to more pursuit, which leads to more withdrawal. This is why it's so helpful to understand the cycle because you can see what's going on and try to mitigate it. So, what are you actually supposed to do? With all the information we shared, this is first the key thing being aware of this cycle, being aware of what it is that's potentially going on through your partner's mind, and comparing and reflecting of what is going in through your own experience. Strategy one, don't try to eliminate their anxiety. Your job as their partner is not to make sure that they never feel anxious. And the thing is, you can't. Nobody can other than the person themselves. You can provide all the love, reassurance, and care in the world. It simply may not be enough, and most of the times it isn't, to fill that inner void because that is stemming from something that is much more complex than the relationship itself. You putting yourself in that role can create this reassurance dependency where there is a constant need for more of that reassurance. There's a constant loop. You're creating a feedback loop, basically. Your job is to be predictable, communicative, and emotionally safe while allowing your partner to develop their own sort of regulatory strategies for their anxiety. For the first part, being predictable. This could look like having specific routines and rituals that you can always fall back on to make sure that your partner kind of like knows what's coming. Maybe that's a morning text, maybe that's checking in throughout the day, maybe that's like a nightly call or a weekly date or a bi-weekly kind of relationship check-in, or maybe you buy flowers or you cook them a nice meal and you do so at a pretty consistent basis. That's pretty great. And with the communicative part that helps with the predictability is, let's say you are having a tough day at work, or there's additional life stresses, or there's something that could potentially be perceived in a negative way by your partner. This is where you can talk about that. Hey, I'm going through a lot right now. I'm feeling kind of stressed. I may be a little bit more quiet, or I may stay longer at work, or I may not be able to see you this week. I love you. And, I just hope you understand. By letting them into your world a little bit, it can help soothe some of that anxiety. So let me give you an example. Instead of saying like, no, I promise everything's fine. I love you. Nothing's wrong. If your partner's coming to you with anxiety, you can say, I hear that you're feeling worried right now. And I want to let you know nothing has changed for me. I still feel the same way. We're okay. And I'm going to finish what I'm doing and I'll call you tonight. Right. So you set your own boundary. You still take care of yourself, but you can still show up for your partner. Right. So you're being communicative and you're being predictable. You're giving them a little bit of an internal insight, but you're also giving them something that they can rely on, which is, I'll call you later tonight. You're also giving them some of the space so that they can manage their anxiety in that moment. And you can also take care of yourself. And then later you can reconnect when the timing is right. Reassurance, boundary, predictability. Strategy number two, be clearer rather than ambiguous. As we've learned, anxious attachment struggles particularly with uncertainty, with the unknown. It is a big threat and fear factor. You don't need to report every single thing that you do or every movement that you make. But if you are going to be unavailable, if you are going to be a little bit different, if there's anything that's going to, like I said, potentially make your partner feel that way, let them know, right? A simple text. Hey, I'm going to be busy today. I'm going to be busy this afternoon. I might not be able to respond until tonight because I'm, doing this work project or whatnot, but I'll talk to you later and I'm looking forward to it. Have a nice day. Done. 10 seconds of your day so your partner soothe your anxiety also provides predictability. This can help prevent an unnecessary spiral, which actually helps you at the end of the day too, because it doesn't drag you into that cycle. Most importantly, it's not about managing the anxiety for them. It's just about being a predictable partner. Strategy three, don't punish their bids for connection. For example, your partner says to you, I feel like you've been distant. Sometimes, we get frustrated. It just becomes overwhelming. There's a lot of pressure. We may say something like, you're just being ridiculous. Or like, oh, you're just trying to pick a fight again. Or like, oh, here we go again, right? That's kind of like a punishment for their bid, right? They just want to connect. They just want closeness. And instead of doing so, you can kind of say like, listen, I understand that maybe I'm being a little bit quieter today, or that you have felt like there is some distance, but I've actually just been doing whatever. Let's say I'm overwhelmed with work, or I'm really tired today, or I'm just, there's a lot on my mind, right? Or I'm just not in the mood to talk as much. It has nothing to do with you. You can validate their emotions without validating the interpretation. You don't have to validate the fact that like you are distant and that you don't, have interest anymore, because maybe that's what their brain is thinking. But you can still validate that, like, hey, maybe yeah, there is a little bit of distance, or I could see why you would feel that way. What's important is like you saying, I understand that you feel rejected doesn't actually mean like you are rejected, right? It doesn't mean you're validating that your partner is right in what they're saying, but that you are trying to understand the experience. Strategy 4 is a really important one. Don't reward unhealthy protest behaviors. So this is the other side. If your partner starts threatening to leave you, insulting you, repeatedly calling or texting you, invading your privacy, kind of crossing your boundaries, demanding proof of love and care, monitoring you, controlling who you interact with, you do not have to participate in this. And this is where it can get into, like I mentioned earlier, that more unhealthy, toxic side. This is where you have to put your foot down about certain things. And boundaries come from what you are going to do, not what you are, putting on them, right? It's about a healthy boundary is like, I'm willing to talk about what's make you feel insecure, but I'm not willing to have this conversation while I'm being insulted. Okay. So you can insult me, but if you insult me, I will not talk about this. I'm going to walk away. I'm going to leave, or I'm not going to engage, right? I'm happy to reinsure you, but I'm not going to be having this conversation for the next 2 hours, right? So I will give you, let's say 15, 20 minutes. We can talk about it. At that point, I'm going to go and whatever, do something else. So you can engage to the point where you feel comfortable, where you're not violating your own boundaries, and then you can move into something else. This is really important. You emphasize that boundaries are not abandonment. And this actually kind of teaches your partner that as well. Because if you can have these conversations, if you can provide, the reassurance that they might be looking for, or, engage in some sort of conversation that they want to talk about, but also putting a boundary down, it can help them better learn to expect that, okay, just because somebody has boundaries, that doesn't mean that they're leaving me. It doesn't mean that they don't want to be with me. It doesn't mean that they are abandoning me, but it more so means that they want to make sure that their needs are being met, that they care about themselves and they do care about me. However, we're going to have to go into this in a bit more of a balanced way. Number 5, learn to distinguish reassurance from these reassurance seeking loops. Healthy reassurance is like, your partner might say something like, hey, I've been kind of feeling insecure today. Can you just remind me that we're okay? And you can say, yes, of course we're okay. I love you. Everything is great. I'm looking forward to seeing you. Okay. And the conversation moves on. Done. It doesn't keep going. Now, reassurance loop is where, same question, you'll say, yes, we're okay. I love you. Oh, but are you really sure? Yes, I'm really sure. Oh, then why did you say it like that? And you might say, I don't know. You may say, oh, well, you sound annoyed. You don't really sound like you want to say it. You sound like you're being forced. You may say, I'm not annoyed. And they'll say, no, 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 like you're definitely annoyed. And then you'll say, well, no, I don't feel annoyed. And then now neither person's regulated, because eventually you will feel annoyed because they're pushing you and they will not get the reassurance that they need. So the goal isn't, oh, how do I say the perfect thing or do the perfect thing to finally stop their anxiety? It's more, how can I acknowledge their anxiety without letting it dictate this entire interaction, because that is exhausting for both partners. The final tip that I have is encourage your partner to build security outside of you. This is crucial. Best relationships are ones where both partners can exist in their own individual self, their own individual life, and when they come together, there is this beautiful harmony. It's almost like a bonus being together. Neither person completely relies on the other for their emotional regulation. You can kind of encourage your partner to build their own friendships, their hobbies, their independent goals, to chase their dreams, to go to therapy if they need. You can refer them to me. How to build their own self-soothing skills, to have their own emotional awareness, learning to tolerate uncertainty. And these are all like really big things to do, but you can also kind of model that behavior, not in a kind of like a judgmental, oh, I know more than you, I'm better than you way. Like kind of engaging in things that could help your partner build this. Maybe they're too anxious to do it on their own, but this could look like the two of you engaging in some hobbies and then slowly seeing what works for them, and then they continue on their own, right? Or making sure that you carve out time for all these things yourself and then modeling that as a behavior for them, right? Not forcing them to do it, just showing them how a relationship could work when there's security outside of just each other. Now, if you're watching all this and you're feeling like, damn, like I am the one who withdraws a lot, like I really struggle being there for my partner and showing them that reassurance, you need to think, are you actually asking for space because you need it in that moment to regulate, to reflect, to calm down? Or are you using that space to kind of avoid intimacy with your partner and getting a closer, deeper connection? There is a difference here. And sometimes your behavior could actually be further exacerbating that anxiety, especially when it's not coming from a point of being overwhelmed by, the anxious person coming towards you, but more so your own kind of inability or discomfort of building close connections. You may find that you're leaning more towards that avoidance side if you're disappearing, you're refusing to communicate, you're withholding affection from your partner to maybe regain control of the situation. You might become more emotionally unavailable, or you're threatening to leave the relationship whenever conflict occurs. That's where things can get a bit tricky, right? There's a difference between feeling overwhelmed and not being able to do this in the moment, then kind of leaning more into this avoidance side. That itself can be part of the cycle. If you are resonating with this, then you may be experiencing some of that avoidant attachment. And I will link below a very in depth lecture that I put together explaining avoidance and giving some practical strategies of how to get more comfortable sitting there in these uncomfortable moments. Because part of this could genuinely be that you find discomfort in your partner's anxious reactions and you don't know how to go best about it because you were just never taught how to deal with people's emotions, let alone your own, and therefore you pull away and withdraw. Your partner's anxiety doesn't excuse their controlling behavior, but their anxiety also doesn't mean that you get to avoid every uncomfortable situation. True security in this dynamic doesn't mean that your partner never gets anxious again. It doesn't mean that you are always there and ready for anything, but it's more so that the anxious partner can learn, if I experience uncertainty, I don't need to act on it right away. And then you can learn, I can maintain my boundaries without becoming emotionally unavailable to my partner. And together, it's knowing that we can have distance without it meaning abandonment, and we can also have closeness without it meaning that you have a loss of autonomy. If you're dating someone with anxious attachment, you don't need to become their therapist, right? You don't need to spend your entire life proving that you love them and that you care about them. But you also don't need to see their anxious behavior as manipulation or neediness. Try to get deep and understand the fear underneath that behavior while still holding on to your boundaries and making sure that your needs are met too. The goal isn't for your partner to become less anxious, you to become more accommodating, but both people to find a mutual security. I really hope this video helped you out a bit to better understand your partner and the dynamic that you might find yourself in. If you're watching this video and you'd like to work with me, whether that's one-on-one or with your relationship, and see how we can improve it as a couple, feel free to check the link in my bio for a free consultation where we can get to know a little bit more about you and see if we're a good fit. Let me know if you have any questions down below in the comments or anything that you would like me to address in a future video. And I really wish you the best in your relationship. I'll see you next time.